Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a bonus episode of iPolitics No Talking Points partnership in conjunction with Compass Media and Liaison Strategies. With me once again is the always revered David Valentin, the principal of Liaison Strategies. David, welcome back. It is great to have you again.
Thanks for having me back.
You know, David, I was going through some of your polling. Once again, we have this partnership where we are working with you at Compass Media to try to engage people in the city of Ottawa and figure out what some of their issues are moving forward with the upcoming municipal election this fall. What are you seeing out there?
Well, we're seeing quite a bit. We're asking, of course, this month about the mayoral election, but we also asked some pretty deep issue packages on traffic and transit, two things I've been hearing a lot about from Ottawa voters. So we asked very specific questions about those two. And of course, the big question is, how are all of these issues intersecting? And how are these issues driving the vote in the mayoral race?
Now, you kind of led us right into it. Let's jump into it. What are the headline numbers you're seeing on the mayoral race, and is there any surprises for you?
Well, we decided to test two different ballots this month, one with Councillor Tim Tierney and one without him, because we don't know if he plans to enter the race or not. There's been some speculation. He's made some comments that have led people to believe, okay, maybe he might go in. And so when we included the Councillor Tierney on the ballot, the mayor is still at 37%, Councillor Leeper at 32%, Alex Lawson further behind at 14%, and Tim Tierney at 11%. And we also asked this month about Mr. Saravenamutu, who is at 5%. So far, a very close race. If Mr. Tierney decided to enter, a 5-point margin, and given the margin of error what it is, it would be a pretty tough race. That being said, 34% of the electorate would be undecided. Now, if Mr. Tierney doesn't run, something very interesting happens, which is 87% of his supporters go right back into the undecided pool. So if he runs, a lot of people say, well, okay, I'll vote for him. But if he doesn't, almost 90% of those people are going back to saying, I don't know who I would vote for in that circumstance. But it's interesting, these are people who would not, this 87% is not voting for the mayor necessarily. They're sort of switching between Mr. Tierney and undecided. Now, if Mr. Tierney doesn't run, 41%, as I mentioned, would be undecided, 25% for Mr. Sutcliffe, 21% for Mr. Leeper. So you see a very tight race continuing regardless of whether Mr. Tierney joins or not.
And is it better, in your opinion, for the mayor to have more candidates like Mr. Tierney in the race? Like, one would think if you're in the incumbent, the more challengers, the better it is to split off the vote against you.
That's right. And that would be my instinct too. I think then you would have, when we're looking at the demographic makeup, the regional makeup of the vote, we see Alex Lawson's doing very well in West Ottawa. Mr. Tierney is doing very well in East Ottawa. So I think for the mayor, if you can divide and conquer, that's a great way to win.
And you talk about Alex Lawson and some of the upstart challengers. Are you seeing growth in these candidates? Is there an opportunity, do you think, for them? Is there a clear path for victory for some of these candidates?
Well, Lawson has been displaying some growth. He's not in the 20% range yet. Mr. Leeper is still in second place. I think the interesting question is, this big chunk of undecided vote, 41%, where are they going to go? And how are the candidates going to be able to message towards that group? If undecided were a candidate, undecided would win the election, right? So this is the big question, is what are we doing with this big pie of people? Now, if we're looking at the demographics, age, gender, region, language, and asking ourselves, who do the undecided voters most closely resemble? The winner there is actually the mayor, Mark Sutcliffe. His voter coalition looks and behaves in the same way as the undecided pool. So there is an opportunity there, but at the same time, these are voters who are, for now at least, not parking their support with him.
Really? So
yeah.
At the end of the day, is this a normal trend that you're seeing in other cities across the province, or is this unique characteristics of the city of Ottawa?
I think we're seeing some unique things in Ottawa, especially when we look at the mayor's approval, which is down again from last month. Most mayors have positive approval ratings. People, just to start getting into some of these questions about transit and traffic, really unhappy. But before we get too deep, when we start compounding and looking at those angriest voters, the mayor is still winning narrowly, only by 2%, but he's still doing quite well. So, people are really angry about a whole host of things, but they haven't really lined up behind one of the challengers. So I think that's the dilemma for those running against the mayor, and that's the mayor's strength right now.
I noticed in your polling, in the horse race polling, that the mayor did better with French voters than people that identified as Francophone voters, rather than he was actually at a negative with the English voters. Do you see this playing out? Is that an anomaly, or is this something you're starting to see a trend in?
Well, that's something that we sort of want to keep our eye on long distance, see if the trend continues. I always mention to people, the trend is more important than any particular snapshot. It's always good to point out, especially for people who are going into the reports, which are hosted online. You can read the full thing. Some of these subsamples are a little smaller. So our English sample is quite large, about 900 people. The French sample is a little smaller, just about 100. So, we're going to see more movement because the margin of error is larger for that subsample. So we're going to read those numbers directionally for now and then see if it continues along the way.
Excellent. On OC Transpo, tell me what you were seeing. Are you surprised by any of the numbers? Let our viewers know the top line numbers, please.
So am I surprised? Not necessarily. I mean, listen, people really are unhappy. And I think if you live in Ottawa, you sort of know all about this. Transit approval for OC Transpo, 64% disapprove. On reliability, 81% disapprove. On wait times, 60% disapprove. On safety, 47% disapprove. So no matter which way you slice it, people are really unhappy about the transit situation. Reliability and delays is the number one problem, according to Ottawa residents. And I would say, looking at the data, that pans out. But all the other ones are still operational. Travel times being too long, 11%. A service being too infrequent, another 11%. People really want to see more to improve the service that there is today before you expand. 60% saying that should be the priority before we try to prioritize expansion at 20%. So really, it's a lot of people saying fix this. The mayor's sort of issue is that he sort of ran, well, not sort of, he ran on saying he would fix the situation. And of course, we're not seeing those fixes just yet. Just the other week, I saw in Ottawa Compass and other outlets, a bus sort of went off the rails, got unhinged, and had a very gentle crash into a supermarket. And I said, what a interesting metaphor for the transit system in Ottawa right now, which sort of, for a lot of people, feels like one big collision that they're still in the middle of. They're not on the other side of it just yet. So we're seeing a lot on these numbers. And I think what's interesting is that, we are seeing some things that are not necessarily what people would expect. Even when we see all these issues on transit, Councillor Leeper is performing better, but the mayor is still holding his own with some of these voters.
Now, I mean, it is fair to say that a lot of these issues were there before the mayor got elected. Councillor Leeper has been elected from 2014. Does that make it harder for either one of them to really come out ahead on this issue?
I think so. I think at the same time, I think people are looking for progress and people are looking to understand when is the problem going to be solved. It would be one thing if everyone understood that at the end of this year, the issues with the LRT are going to be solved and we won't be experiencing them any longer. I don't think anyone has that in their head right now. Certainly, we're not hearing from the mayor that's what the plan is. There are some sort of gentle announcements about reliability and the upload and all these other things, but I don't think anyone is promising no more issues ever again after this date. And so I think that's the question for me is what are these challengers going to put forward in terms of solutions? How actionable are they going to be? What's the time frame? And how credible are these plans? Because if they don't stand up to scrutiny and people don't believe them, it may actually do more to damage them than to hurt them. But I think as we're seeing, Councillor Leaper is performing really well on people who have very specific complaints, despite the fact that there's a lot of frustration with the transit system. When we start looking at those crosstabs and seeing the micro movement, people who say travel time and poor connections is actually the worst problem for the system, they're disproportionately more likely to vote for Councillor Leaper. So once you see very specific complaints, aside from just the general reliability, you do see his numbers go up. And conversely, the mayor is doing better with those who are frustrated but don't have specifics.
Is this an opportunity for some of the lesser known challengers, perhaps, in this race, with an issue that is so visceral to people? Like I haven't taken OC Transpo in Ottawa since I first moved here, but I have the impression that it's not run well. Is this a place where there's opportunity for people like Mr. Lawson and others?
So that's a great question, because Alex Lawson's opportunity really is with voters who link traffic relief to better transit. And so even if they're not taking transit themselves, there is this subset of people who believe that better transit is the best way to reduce traffic. And he's doing much further ahead with that voter coalition group than the others. So the real issue for him is that coalition group itself is not large enough really to augment his support. So he's found an interesting lane to occupy. He just needs to grow that lane now and really bring more people in. And I think you'll see some of his support would improve. It's a really interesting function of the election that we have a long time to go. We're talking really sort of in depth about things today, but there's a lot yet to happen, including the return to work, of course, for the public servants. And the effect that will have on traffic and transit will be fascinating to watch once that gets going in July.
That's a great point. Do you see this issue getting better or worse over the next couple of months? I'm not asking to look into the future, but from what you've seen with the polling you've already done, are these numbers trending the right way with the mayor making an announcement on this, or are his numbers actually staying the same or going the wrong way?
Well, I think the mayor took a risk when he asked for the return to office, both because it's a personal inconvenience to a lot of people who feel they can do the job just as well as at home or otherwise. And now, if it goes well, what does going well look like? I guess it would be just as bad as it is today, right? If it's just as bad as it is today, do I really think he'll win something from that? No. If it gets worse, I think definitely he's created a situation where he could take the blame for asking and the federal government to do this, right? Never mind the public servants who may say, now that they actually have to do the commute all over again, experience the transit system all over again, who may say, why in the world did the mayor sign me up for this? They, of course, will be angry and frustrated if there are traffic delays, if there are transit delays. They would be looking for someone to blame. The mayor has sort of put himself in the window for that sort of thing to take place. So I don't think this was a very wise strategy. That being said, it's going to happen. Whether it goes well or not, again, I really don't think it's going to turn out to be a net positive. The other thing, of course, is that we know there's a lot of downstream effects that are happening because of the worldwide economy, because of things happening in international affairs that have not hit Canada yet. When are we anticipating some of these downstream effects to take place from the Strait of Hormuz? It's right around October. So we already know that affordability is a large issue for Ottawa residents today, but it's going to become more of an issue as some of these downstream effects begin to hit. And when I talk about downstream, I mean, the fertilizer wasn't able to get out, so people planted less. People have planted less, so the cost of food is going to go up. As people look at their budgets and more of it is being swallowed by essential goods, what is their appetite going to be for future property tax rate increases, even if they believe that the city needs more money? I think these present a really challenging portrait. And at the same time, a lot of voters, especially those in the public service, and we know Ottawa has a lot of public servants, they are spending more of their money to go to work, right, via either transit or traffic, either transit or driving themselves down. And there's related expenses, whether it's parking, whether it's, you were able to make your lunch at home. Now you might have to buy it because you don't have enough time. There's all sorts of things that are going to be sort of affecting people, including, Maybe they have to get new daycare arrangements. And all of these costs and all of these pressures are going to be putting Ottawa residents and voters in a really interesting situation in October because it's all coming to a head right as they're about to vote.
Now, David, I've got some experience in political campaigns. It surprises me, as you said, the decision that the mayor made by actually jumping on this grenade in some ways and making a decision to do so. In breaking down demographics, and you're always trying to figure out who your voting coalition is, it almost seems like the mayor doesn't feel like civil servants in this city, which are a big part of the city, are a part of his voting coalition, as you're talking about. Is there anything you have that show that civil servants are less likely to vote? Like, to me, they would be, you know, working age people that have a strong desire for their community to do better. Like they seem like the kind of citizens that would be more inclined to vote. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, we know from research a couple of things about who is more likely to show up on election day. One, if you're a woman, you're more likely to show up. If you're older, you're more likely to show up. The next two categories are more important, though, and that is income and education. The more educated you are, the higher your income is. These are disproportionately linked to you actually showing up to the polls. So, okay, we're thinking about Ottawa public servants. What do we think the average education and income of some of these people are? It's definitely going to be higher than the general population. So you're looking at a group of people who demographically are probably among the most aligned and most habitual voters in Ottawa, right? And they vote because, especially in federal elections, because they know to a certain extent the decision is going to affect them. I think now the really interesting thing is this could have been a federal decision. The backlash could have been purely federal, right? The mayor, as you say, did not have to jump on this, but for whatever reason he did. And now the question is, are people going to remember? My guess is the other campaigns are going to do their part to remind folks about that. And the other question is, of course, are people actually going to blame him for it? Or are they going to say, you know what? Yeah, this is a gigantic inconvenience and gee, I don't like him and I don't approve of what he's doing. But the other options are actually so much worse, or I really don't know what to make of them, or I don't know enough about them, or, for whatever reason, I don't like them. Let me vote for him anyway.
Yeah. Now, let's move on to our third topic, which is the topic of traffic and congestion. What did you see? What were citizens of Ottawa telling you in regards to traffic?
Well, people are really angry. And colloquially, I talk about anecdata and talking to people in the city. The number of complaints I've heard recently about potholes, people telling me there should be a class action lawsuit against the city of Ottawa by drivers because the potholes are so bad. We didn't actually ask about that, but we did ask about traffic, as you mentioned. 67% of residents telling us it's gotten worse. 38% saying it's a very serious problem. Another 52% saying it's somewhat serious. How is the mayor and it's the city handling traffic? 77% disapprove of it. Roadwork coordination, again, it's a long battery of numbers. 67% say it's a poor job. And what causes it? 37% telling us it's too many cars. 35% telling us it's too many cars and poor coordination. And not a lot of solutions. Some people want better timing of traffic lights or better transit so fewer people have to drive. But we're really seeing a lot of fragmented opinions on what may be able to solve it, which is a problem for the challengers because they're going to have to figure out what their traffic plan is. And so far, it does not seem like Ottawa residents believe there's one silver bullet that would fix a lot of it. All that being said, if we look at people who say traffic is worse and they disapprove of how traffic is being handled, and they say the road work coordination is poor, among that subset of people, the mayor is leading by 2 points, 35% to 33%. Lawson's at 15% in that situation. That's 41% of the electorate who are in this combined category, and the mayor is still winning. So that being said, 2-point lead. Listen, that's a tie effectively, but it sort of shows that he still has strength even among that group. So he's not really being punished as much as he could be on some of these issues, at least not yet.
Now, I find it really interesting. First of all, as an Ottawa resident, it's kind of reassuring to know that I'm not the only one. Thought I was going crazy there for a while because you can drive down West Hunt Club and hit a red light, every single light for about 2 kilometers. Um, but how much of this is a voting issue to people?
I think it's really becoming a more top of mind issue, especially when we look at our monthly tracking on what's the biggest issue in Ottawa. We are seeing that traffic is at 14%, transit is at 20%. There's going to be some overlap of people who rank those as their number twos as well. But that's 34% of the electorate telling us that that's their top issue. And that combined traffic and transit is larger than any other issue in the city. Next biggest one would be housing affordability. So these are really important, and I don't think they can be ignored. Um, but also, when we think about what issue can the mayor actually address, well, I mean, I think there are people out there who would say housing affordability. The mayor can certainly do something about it. City council can certainly do something about it. But there's other governments that are at play there: the federal government, the provincial government. When you look at traffic and transit, these are things that are really in the window of the mayor's office, things that people really do believe that the mayor can impact. So it sort of becomes even more of a political liability from that perspective.
So, what would you see as the number one issue inside these subsects?
And I think it's always hard to understand each individual subset of voter. What I find really interesting in sort of the polling we've been doing recently is how much lower crime has been performing as an issue. We're seeing inflation also begin to pop up. And I should mention, inflation's at 14%, which is now equivalent to traffic. They're both at 14. So we are seeing this cost of living being expressed here in a really interesting way. And we may need to start asking some cost of living questions in the next survey to keep an eye on this. But as I mentioned, some of, the cost of everything is going up. It's really sort of hard to understand what are we getting a deal on these days, because you go to the supermarket and every price has gone up and up. So I really think as we look to the election day, and more of these things move and more of these concerns shift, I think the question is, as they always say, where is the puck going? I do think affordability is going to end up becoming a larger issue than we're seeing today. But at the same time, what can the mayor do about affordability, right? Aside from property taxes, there's not a lot of levers for them to be able to pull. But also, we need to understand that traffic and transit are also affordability issues. The longer you're driving, the more gas you're burning. If you can't get reliably from point A to point B, right? If it's taking you 2 hours rather than 30 minutes to take transit and get somewhere, time is money, and you're spending time doing this, that you're not working, that you're not doing other more productive things. So I do think that these issues are all interconnected as well.
I'm finding that the electorate seems grumpy out there, not just in Ottawa, but around the province and the country, just with all the uncertainty out there. I'm sure you're seeing that in other polling. How vulnerable does this make incumbents in this upcoming municipal election across the province, in your mind, David?
Well, I think for a lot of incumbents, if they can offer stability, if they can offer something, a continuation of service, that can be a really reassuring presence for voters. I think the issue here might be that people are not happy with the service. No one wants to continue it the way it's taking place right now. Okay, what does that mean? For now, I think there's this incumbent advantage. People know who the mayor is. They're comfortable voting for him. A lot of them have voted for him before. His challengers are not as well known as the mayor, just from a facet of the fact that he's the incumbent. That interesting measure that we've seen here that we haven't seen other places, his approval rating is quite low, and it got lower. So I think my question is, for the next survey we do next month, or I should say later on in June, where is that approval rating going? Will it stay stable? Will it continue to go down? Will it go up? That's the big question for me, because if his own voter coalition is voting for him, despite not thinking he's doing a very good job, that to me in the long term could be unsustainable. And then the question is, does one of the challengers put something credible together and put that in front of Ottawa voters, and they decide, okay, this is good enough for us to switch?
I'm glad you mentioned that. I think it's really important to tell listeners that the next survey that we are putting out, I agree 100%. We should talk about taxes. We should talk about levies. We see the CBC just came out with a report that says City Hall's running a $3.8 billion deficit on not even infrastructure, just roads, parks, and facilities, not including water and sewer. And they're looking to increase, actually put a levy on homeowners in this city to help make up to about a $200+ million a year levy on homeowners. So I think you're 100% right. The affordability issue is something we've got to ask in the next round of questions. And I think the work you're doing in getting feedback from voters and informing them is really interesting, David. And we appreciate you moving that needle forward for us. I do have a question, and off the cuff here, I'm putting you on the spot. You see David Coletto out there kind of questioning IVR polling and the use of IVR polling. I can tell you I've used IVR polling my entire political career and to quite successfully. What are your thoughts on IVR polling and some of the critiques that you're seeing out there?
I mean, listen, I think everyone has their preferred methodology. At our company, we've taken out ads actually reminding people that no one is perfect. Nobody's perfect. But that being said, IVR has been the most accurate polling for the Ontario election. We were number one with IVR. IVR was number one and number two in the national federal election. We were number two in that election. Depending on how you squint and how you look at it and you measure, we were either number one or number two in Nova Scotia, again, in their election with IVR. IVR has consistently outperformed other methodologies. Liaison, my company, depending on how you look at not depending on how you look at the rankings. When you look at the rankings, has outperformed Mr. Coletto's company, Abacus. I think it's wonderful to have a difference of opinion on methodologies, but no one has a monopoly on information and data. We're all doing the best we can to measure and model as we can. And for sure, in previous elections, we've seen things go sideways for every methodology, right? But that doesn't mean you just throw up your hands and say, well, it didn't work well one time in this market, so let's just pretend it can't be done. I'm a big believer that if you work hard and you measure twice before you cut, you're going to get a good result. Look at the sample composition, make sure you're getting a good sample. Ask yourself the tough questions about the methodology you're employing. Be your own critic and have a healthy culture at your companies where people can feel they can challenge you and challenge the assumptions you're making when you're doing the research. I think those are the best approaches to this. But I get it. It's a very emotional issue for people who are involved in the race and who are working for a candidate. And listen, I'm sure that all the candidates for mayor are lovely, fine, wonderful people, and that I would enjoy talking to them. I haven't actually talked to any of them, I don't think, in my entire life. Maybe Mr. Sutcliffe at one point, but maybe like 8 or 9 years ago. So I'm sure they're all great people, but I'm taking a really dispassionate approach to this, really just trying to bring back the best numbers. And then we'll be able to compare those numbers to the election result. And we'll see how well we did at the end.
We really appreciate your work on this. I look forward to seeing your results for June. Ladies and gentlemen, David Valentin with Liaison Strategy. Great work, and thank you for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, and we'll talk again soon.